all.
The United States has long boasted its commitment to human rights and has been quick to point out what it sees as violations in other parts of the world. But what is happening inside its own borders? Do its people enjoy all the freedoms and rights they are promised? According to U.S.-based human rights watchdog Freedom House, America's democratic institutions have suffered erosion from flawed immigration policies and a broken healthcare system to socioeconomic inequalities. Problems in human rights within the U.S. are far more serious than what many have been led to believe. Today, we take a deep dive into some of these issues. Gun violence, a long-standing problem that's only getting worse. On August 3rd, 2019, 21-year-old Patrick Crucius drove 1,000 kilometers to a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. With a semi-automatic rifle, he randomly fired at crowds, killing 22 people and injuring 24 others. This was the 7th worst mass shooting in U.S. history.
It was crazy. There was bodies, people running out of the store. There was deceased bodies on the floor. It was horrendous.
In my opinion, I don't feel safe anymore. It's hard. I've never seen it so close, and we live in the borderland.
I'm pretty sure I'm not the only Latino in the United States that feels scared. I'm telling you, it could have been any one of us.
As tragic as it was, this incident was just the tip of the iceberg. 39,427. That was the number of gun-related deaths in 2019 in the U.S. There were 417 mass shootings that year, averaging more than one a day. During the first 46 weeks of 2019, there were 45 school shootings, and that was about one a week. Between 2008 and 2017, on average, one person was killed with a gun every 15 minutes. Americans make up 4% of the world's population, but own 46% of all guns. That means there are 120 guns for every 100 U.S. residents. The U.S. has as many gun shops as pharmacies. The secondhand gun market is huge. Regulations on firearm sales have many loopholes in terms of background checks, age limits, and eligibility. Why can't the U.S. implement a comprehensive gun control law? One reason is the right to bear arms. It was enshrined in the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, a major barrier to implementing strict gun laws. Another reason is the National Rifle Association. It's one of the biggest political forces in Washington, D.C., with 5 million members funding politicians and lobbying against gun control. Faced with one school shooting after another, the NRA says the answer is not fewer guns, but more. Its proposed solution, arming teachers and keeping children away from violent video games. In the 2016 election, the NRA spent $54 million supporting Republican candidates. Among the 535 members of Congress, 307, or nearly 60%, were backed by the NRA in their campaigns. The comfortable relationship between the NRA and American politicians put a roadblock in front of gun control efforts. When innocent young lives are lost, Washington can offer little more than thoughts and prayers. With no gun control legislation on the horizon and no end in sight to gun violence, the newspaper USA Today says America has entered a new and disturbing era of mass shootings. The affordability of healthcare is another issue drawing fierce debates across America. According to Gallup, in 2019, 33% Americans said they or their family put off treatment for a medical condition due to high costs, and 25% said they delayed looking into a serious condition. The rate of postponing medical care was the highest in the past 20 years. Meantime, a report by RX Saving Solutions said the prices of 3,400 types of prescription drugs went up by 10% from the year before, 5 times the rate of inflation.
That one to see, like, okay, so
These Americans are traveling 1,300 kilometers north in a caravan from the U.S. state of Minnesota to Ontario, Canada. Their goal? To buy insulin at a tenth of the price it would cost in their own country. The drug is a lifesaver for those suffering from type 1 diabetes.
Woo! It is staggering how much more money it is in America. You can see why 1 in 4 Americans are rationing their insulin because they can't afford it. We are from a wealthy country. We are from a great country, but we are not taking care of our citizens.
This retails for around $300 for 1 vial, and I just got it for 25 US dollars here. Now, why the hell is that? Why? It's crazy to me. So I am as excited as I am to save some money. I'm devastated to know that, you know, affordable insulin is just available to us across the border.
There was also anger that people continued to die from diabetes because they couldn't afford proper treatment.
I am up here demanding justice for his death.
Nicole Smithholt lost her son, Alec, in 2017. He was rationing insulin because of the expense.
Here we are talking about how even though there is a treatment for type 1 diabetes, my own son didn't benefit from that treatment because he couldn't afford it. It's difficult. It's a hard pill to swallow.
The American Journal of Public Health suggests health issues have led to 2/3 of bankruptcies in the U.S. Its report looked at 1,000 cases between 2013 and 2016, and it found a majority of those who had trouble paying medical bills were middle-class Americans who had health insurance. And to speak nothing of those without health insurance, a Gallup report says between 2016 and 2018, 7 million Americans lost their medical insurance. 21% under the age of 35 were uninsured. Healthcare, or the lack of it, has become a key factor that divides the rich and the poor. The U.S. Census Bureau says the income gap is at its largest in 50 years. It's measured through the Gini Index, with 0 representing total equality and 1 representing total inequality. In 1967, the Gini Index was 0.397. In 2018, it climbed to 0.485. By comparison, no European nation had a score greater than 0.38. In 2018, the top 10% of U.S. households controlled 70% of all wealth, up from 60% in 1989. While the share controlled by the top 1% of wealthy Americans went from about 1/5 to nearly 1/3. Those at the bottom half of the wealth distribution saw virtually no increase in their nominal net worth over the last 30 years, while their total share of national wealth dropped from 4% to just 1%. And as we speak, a potentially record-setting amount of money is being poured into the 2020 presidential election campaigns by the wealthy donors and powerful political forces. This, while the 500,000 homeless are without a roof above their heads every night, and 4 in 5 working-class Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck. And then there are the public health crises. Drug overdose has been called the worst addiction epidemic in American history. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says more than 70,000 Americans die from drug overdose each year, making it a leading cause of death in the country. And a majority of those cases involve a prescription opioid. On average, 130 die from opioid overdose every day. And the stories behind these numbers are heart-wrenching.
What are you doing?
28-year-old Danielle Ott was a heroin addict. In their home in Huntington, West Virginia, her mother took this video.
And this is the result of drugs.
It was a slippery slope. Quitting, Danielle said, was hard.
Every time I would try to quit, I would get sick, and then I would want it. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, probably. I've tried to quit it. I couldn't tell you how many times.
To make things worse, Danielle, already a mother of two, found herself pregnant again. At a prenatal ultrasound test, doctors said her child looked all fine, except he would be born addicted to opioids and carry many problems that come with it.
I just can't handle that, looking at my baby and knowing, I did that. I just think that is the most selfish thing in the world to do.
So how did she get here? After the birth of her first child, Danielle developed ulcers. Doctors gave her the powerful opioid pain medication OxyContin, something she grew addicted to over time, and her prescription ran out. A single pill on the street sold for $80, but there was a cheaper alternative.
I called my friend looking for pills, and she told me that she couldn't get them, that she had heroin on her right then and there, that it was the same thing as pain pills. After that, what was the point in buying pills whenever I can spend $30 on that?
Danielle's experience is a familiar story across America, which oftentimes has far worse consequences. Official figures show that in 2018, 10.3 million Americans misused prescription opioids, including 808,000 who used heroin.
They're using opioids, either prescription opioids or heroin, because they have to, because they've become hooked. We have an epidemic of opioid addiction in the United States because doctors have been overprescribing pain medication. Beginning in the 1990s, prescriptions for opioids started to soar, and as the prescribing went up, rates of addiction and overdose deaths went up right along with the increase in prescribing. And the reason the medical community started to become so aggressive in our use of these drugs is, I believe, we were responding in many ways to a multifaceted, brilliant marketing campaign that had been launched originally by one drug company, the maker of OxyContin, known as Purdue in the United States, known as Mundy Pharma in the rest of the world.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says from 1999 to 2017, more than 702,000 people died from a drug overdose. And there's been a sharp increase since 2014. Deaths involving opioids grew at an even faster rate. Low-income groups, especially blue-collar whites, have been disproportionately impacted. And now let's take a look at some numbers here. The Journal of the American Medical Association published a research in 2019 which showed premature deaths increased in 48 out of 50 U.S. states between 2010 and 2017. The Midwest and the South were the worst hit areas, and opioid overdose was a key contributor. Meanwhile, life expectancy in the U.S. had been dropping in recent years. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says that in 2017, the average life expectancy in America was 78.6, the lowest among comparable developed countries. To say America's race relations are not getting better is perhaps an understatement. A 2019 Pew research showed that 65% of Americans said it had become more common for people to express racist or racially insensitive views since 2017. Around 3/4 of blacks and Asians and 58% of Hispanics said they had experienced discrimination. In contrast, 2/3 of whites said they had never experienced racism.